right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, here at Science Park, watching on the live stream and taking in the video recording. Welcome and thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. I'm Lou Rinaldi with the Center for Media and Instructional Innovation, and I'll keep it brief because I don't want to take time away from our honored guest. I want to start by acknowledging three people, Mary Kay Kaminsky and Roger Nim in ITS, and Amanda Patrick at the library for their help in facilitating and promoting this event. So why are we here? I organized this today because I believe very strongly that cross-departmental collaboration is absolutely essential to our collective service to the university mission, and in particular important to President-elect Salovey's goal of a more innovative Yale. And one of the foundational elements of cross-departmental collaboration is an awareness of the goals and the initiatives of our colleagues in different departments. So my team has had the pleasure over the years of partnering with the library on different projects, and I view that relationship between ITS and the library as a vital strategic partnership. So in that spirit, please join me in welcoming Chief Technology Officer of Yale University Library, Mr. Michael Dula.
Thanks, Lou. Am I live on the mic here? It's a pleasure to be here. This is actually a talk I gave about a week and a half ago to library management crowd. Turn down our mic here. There we go. So it's only been slightly updated, so if there's a little bit of inside baseball library stuff, forgive me. I can skip over some of those parts a little quickly. I've been at Yale for just a year, maybe about a year and a month now. So this is also kind of in the nature of a State of the Union of what I've learned in the year, what some things that actually have been accomplished already in the year, and also really looking ahead at the major projects that are on the library's plate, many of which will be coming live within the next few months. So you're also going to get a bit of a sneak preview of a few of the coming attractions at the library. I'll be switching off to the web browser a couple of times and crossing my fingers on a live demo for some of these things that are still very much in beta. So you'll get a chance to look at a couple of those as well. So who is the library? I know you probably can't read this org chart from the back of the room. But the groups at the top reporting to me, there's Mike Friscia, who's the manager of digital library and programming, which is essentially our digital collections programming effort, which I'll talk more about. There's Melissa Wisner, who's the manager of enterprise systems, such as the main library system, Voyager, the integrated library system being the biggest example. Katie Bauer manages our user experience group, which is new. That's been created since I got here. Because I think user experience is, well, it's an important part of my background. I used to do user interface design, and I've seen what happens when it sort of gets spread a little too diffusely and there's nobody looking at it as a whole. Gail Barnett, manager of systems infrastructure, who is here at 25 Science, and there's an open position for our manager of workstation and technology services. So that group is 19 people. But we're managing 920 workstations, plus a growing number of mobile devices, 856 terabytes of storage out of 1.3 petabytes actually available. So that's actually in use. We've got a ton of servers, 4 vHosts, 59 virtual machines, 15 Windows servers, 8 Sun servers. That's a bit of an estimate. It's kind of a moving figure at any given moment. 8 what I would call enterprise systems, big systems that are used across the whole library. And 300 plus custom applications and databases. That's one of the numbers that scares me when I got here. We've been shutting down some of the old systems. We've been decommissioning, we've decommissioned a few dozen since I've been here, as well as a few of the servers associated with them. But it's still a fairly absurd number of applications to try and run. Some of them were programmed years ago. They're running on servers and old operating systems. We don't quite know what they do. Sometimes we turn them off and see if anybody objects. And if they don't, we assume no one's using them anymore. And I'll get into some of the ramifications of that in a few minutes. But that was kind of what I was faced with. Actually, that's better than when I first got here. We have fewer crazy systems than we used to. But we're trying to whittle them down. And that's not including what's running at the Beinecke Library, which has pretty much been running on its own shop, and medical. So there's a lot of other library infrastructure that isn't even reflected in this because it hasn't been directly managed by my group. So what are the big projects we've got going on? Well, there's a website redesign underway. There's a scholarly publishing platform, which we're calling Eli Scholar, which I'm going to show to you in beta shortly, knock wood. We're running something called Atlas Systems. This is one of those inside library things. Atlas Systems runs Iliad, which if any of you have ever borrowed a book on interlibrary loan, that's the system that runs interlibrary loan. They also run two other systems called Aeon and Ares. Aeon is currently running at the Beinecke Library and at Manuscripts and Archives. It's the system that's used to manage special collections, essentially. If you come into the library and you want to see, a Shakespeare First Folio, you don't just check that out using the library system. They have a special system for finding who you are, getting your identification, getting a lot of information about you before they let you have it. And they track exactly where it is at all times. So it's almost like a provenance system in museum terms. It will track that object for its lifespan, who's seen it over the course of its life, where it's been. So it's a very specialized system. We have 2 instances of it now running completely separately at the Beinecke Manuscripts and Archives. We have about 7 other locations of special collections who are also interested in running it, and we're in the process now of trying to figure out, well, do we need 7 iterations of Aeon to manage this? Can we live with the 2 we have and everybody else can go into one of those? Or can we, in some wonderful world, consolidate down to 1? So those discussions are underway. Ares is a system for managing reserves. That's one of those places where we're trying to consolidate. Right now there are 2 types of reserves in the library. There are electronic reserves, which are being run on a custom system that somebody long gone programmed some number of years ago. And print reserves, which are run through the integrated library system. They don't really talk to each other. They don't really talk to much of anything else. They're 2 standalone systems. Ares replaces both of those with an integrated reserve system that will handle both electronic reserves and print reserves. And we're working on getting it to talk to classes V2 as well. So when you go to the class, you can see the reserves for that class of both types. Both Aeon and Ares are run hosted with the vendor. So that's also a change I'll talk about a little bit. Iliad is not, for a complicated series of reasons. SQL 2012, reporting is an emphasis point for the libraries. We're trying to do a better job of capturing metrics. We have a lot of systems that are difficult to get reports out of, notably Voyager, the main system, which to get a report out of, you have to create an access query and run it through Access and then export from that. And it's very difficult when you're talking about 12 million records in Voyager. Access tends to choke on things that big. So we've standardized on SQL 2012 as a reporting service. We've brought up our own server. We've gotten training for a couple of dozen librarians across the library. So I think we have at least a strategy for doing reporting in moving forward. Voyager utilities and enhancement. That Voyager is the main integrated library system. There's always a wide array of things that need to be done to get it to work better, to meet certain needs. If you've been through the main gate at Sterling Library anytime within the last year, there's a little system called red light, green light, where they can now just scan the barcode on the book and they can tell it's been checked out, and you no longer have to go to this long process of checking call slips and stuff like that. So little things like that, which again are custom systems to support old systems that don't do all the little things we'd like them to do. Identity management, many of you in this room know something about. That's a central ITS project which we're very interested in for some reasons I'll get into in a moment. The Hydra project, which is our digital collections infrastructure, which I'm also going to talk about in more detail. And finally, discovery. Libraries do a lot of things. We store stuff, we collect stuff, but none of them are very helpful to our patrons if they can't find stuff. And discovery is something we've not done a particularly good job of in the past, and we are working on that very diligently at the moment. Starting out with the website redesign. When I got here, there was a website redesign group which had accomplished redesigning the front page. That's all they'd done. We had a design floating around for a new front page for the Yale University Library, which was pretty nice. We had an outside consulting firm do it. I mean, I had some quibbles with it, but there wasn't really a mandate to do anything else. So we've created a web design group to go in and look at the whole website, deleting a lot of old, out-of-date, unsupported web pages, trying to move away from static HTML pages, and I'll show you a graph in a minute of just how many there were. Moving content to LibGuides, which are a product which is kind of like a specialized library wiki software, really. But many of the librarians were already using them, but it allows them to manage their own content. So, library IT does not want to be the gatekeeper for all of the web content because there's way too much. And providing study room reservations through a product called LibCal, which is the same company that makes LibGuides. Again, it's hosted, it's easy to use, it's inexpensive, And it allows us now to have students reserve their own study rooms, which they'd never been able to do before. We had a combination of all kinds of paper systems and other systems at different sites where you could sign up on sheets, and it was a bit of a mess. Here's the number of web pages we had. 2 years ago, there were 80,000 library web pages. Currently, we're down to 40,000. We think we'll be down to 20,000 by the end of this year, which is still way too many. I mean, if I'd come in a year ago and somebody said, you have 20,000 web pages that need to be revised, I would have gone, oh, gosh, that's way too many. But that's actually a quarter of where we started, apparently. So that's an unsustainable web model, to say the least. And I hope that future question mark will be a lot lower than 20,000. I'll have to get it down into like 3 figures if we're talking HTML pages, not 5 or 6. And I'll show a bit of the website in a moment. But the strategy is to move things off so that the website is showing content that's generated from libcal for calendaring information, from libguides for things like subject guides. If the economics subject librarian wants to write a guide on how to find economics resources, that's where they do it. They don't do it in a web page. And other systems like that. So we're not going to have a lot of HTML pages. We also have migrated the main, well, at least the new parts of the website into Yale Sites. We went to Drupal starting a year ago, running our own server, and as soon as Yale Sites was ready to support us, we just went live on Yale Sites really about a week and a half ago. So we're trying to get out of the business of managing our own infrastructure as well, whenever we can. Now, so let me just switch over briefly. Let's hope this works, to the web browser. So this is the current website. I don't know if you remember what it looked like a year and a half ago. It's really in January that we rolled this design out, but it's quite different from what the old page looked like. But I just want to show a couple of things really quickly. One is, since I'm going to talk about discovery in a minute, let's show you how many ways there are to discover things now. We have Search the Orbis catalog. We have Search Borrow Direct, which are Ivy Leagues plus, essentially. It's the giant catalog of all of them. If you can't find something in our catalog, we can get it for you quickly from Harvard or Princeton or Cornell or soon UChicago and a few others. Search WorldCat. Down here we've got Search the Law Library catalog. We've got article search. We've got digital collection search. We've got Search Google Scholar. We've got Find Databases by title. We've got Find eJournals by title. There's 8 or 10 search mechanisms just on the home page alone. Not good. I'll talk shortly about some ways in which we're planning to integrate all of that. The other thing, I mentioned libguides. We used to have 3 different links on this page, one for Borrow Direct, one for Interlibrary Loan, one for Scan and Deliver. Each of them took you to an HTML web page which talked about what is Borrow Direct, what is Interlibrary Loan, what is Scan and Deliver, how do you get into them, how do you do things with them. Those have now been replaced by one libguide, which looks like that, called Get It at Yale. And it's managed by Access Services. We don't have to touch it in Library IT. We did help create the template so that it has the same color scheme, the same typeface as the main website, so you don't look like you're going into a completely different system. But essentially, this is content that's been syndicated out to the content owner, which is another part of our overall strategy. Switching back. Okay. Next big project I wanted to talk about is Eli Scholar. When I got here, I was, I guess, mildly surprised to find that Yale did not have any kind of unified scholarly publishing platform. There had been kind of an early attempt, I think, to talk about doing an institutional repository, but it never fully got off the ground. So I said, well, we can pretty easily bring something up quickly that will start to meet some of these needs. And this is where I'm getting into preview mode. This is not officially launched yet, so you're getting a little bit of a sneak preview. We could have built one from scratch, but we have a lot of other things we're building from scratch, which I'm going to talk about. And this one we didn't need to. So we contracted with B Press to get digital commons, and we came up with a long list of initial material to put into it. We're putting in drama MFA theses. We've got Nota Bene, which is a library newsletter, which we thought, hey, that's an easy first project because we control it. We can get it in and learn how to use the system by doing that. Medical theses. That's an example of something that was in an old system. We have a system called Greenstone running at the medical school, which is it's an open access repository software system that's pretty limited, but it's been good enough for their purposes. So we're migrating the medical theses out of Greenstone into Digital Commons. We've got something from Himalayan Studies from Mark Turin on the faculty here, and I can show you that in a minute. We've got at least 3 e-journals that have signed up to be early adopters of this. And we've got scholarly selected works, which is portfolio pages for faculty. It looks kind of like that, elischolar.library.yale.edu. And once again, I am going to boldly go into live mode here and show you this, even though we have not fully officially launched it yet. So there is the home page for Eli Scholar. Primarily, it's being used for two things at the moment. You can sort of browse by department, and you will find some of our early adopter departments who we have created series of content for. Not all of them have actual content in them yet, but they're all committed to getting content in. As an example, here's the library has started putting in old issues of Nota Bene. They're just PDF files. You can pull them up easily. More interestingly, we're putting in the Nepal Studies Association newsletter. This is from a faculty member. So we have now put them all in. We haven't quite finished formatting them. But if you want to look at one, I mean, going back to 1974, you can just click on one, and you'll get a little metadata about it, and a recommended citation, which is automatically generated. And you can download the PDF, which I won't do, but you're welcome to try. Some of them have pretty cover art. Some of them just look like a TypeScript newsletter from 1975, as you might expect. The Yale Medicine Thesis Library, we've been really moving stuff in rapidly. Looks like we're up to 1992 now. So a large number of these have migrated from Greenstone into here. Now, one of the advantages of putting things into here, and we've already heard from a couple of medical students saying, wow, this is great, everything in the site is crawled by Google and Google Scholar, and it pretty quickly shows up there. And I've tested it. I've done a Google search on something like, exercise-induced bronchospasm. Pick something from the title of one of these, and it shows up in the first page of the Google results, even if you don't put in things like Yale to help. So it's well indexed. It's very findable. And the authors all get reports of download statistics automatically of how much has been downloaded. So again, you can just grab one of these, and you'll get a nice little page about what it is. You get the abstract. You get the citation, and if you download it as a PDF, which will take a moment depending on the bandwidth, hopefully not too many, the software automatically generates a nice cover page. It says, this is from Eli Scholar, here's the citation, here's the stuff you need to know about it, because you can't know what the content is underneath. Some of it has a useful cover page, some of it doesn't. Depends on what's been scanned in. But it creates that on the fly automatically for you, which is nice. This is taking a moment to do. Maybe it's a long one. But it's the findability and the ease of use are the reason we picked it. It works out of the box. We didn't have to bring up any hardware. We're in the process of training a scholarly publishing committee of librarians currently to support it. And the two things it does that we don't have a live example of yet on the site that are a little more than just uploading collections is it does journal management. If you set up a journal in here, and here's your example of the cover page. Got the branding, Yale University Eli Scholar, it's got the title, it's got the author, it's got a recommended citation, and then you scroll down a little bit and you get the actual thesis, complete with this nice little leatherette cover. But as I was saying, for journals, if you set up a journal in this system, and we have about 3 journals now that are going through the setup process, it creates the editorial workflow, and they train the editors. So the editors of the journal can set up whatever kind of workflow they want. They can put up a link, submit your articles to this journal here. They can provide for peer review. You can even do double-blind peer review. They can send edits back to the authors. They can accept, reject, do all that kind of thing, eventually leading to the publication of an issue of the journal online. So it works very well for that. The other thing it does, which we've not rolled out yet, and we haven't even got training on yet, is it manages conferences in kind of the same way. If you want to set up a conference or a symposium and show both, here's the calendar of when the conference is coming, here's where you click to submit a paper idea or a panel idea, manage the workflow behind the scenes of whether it gets accepted or whether it gets sent back and forth, and then eventually publish conference proceedings. I'm almost afraid to talk about it because there's so many of these at Yale, I'm afraid we might get flooded with them. So how we will support them if that happens, I'm not quite sure, but we're going to get a few up in the next few months, at least retrospectively, just so we can get more familiar with the software and how that works. I know just within the library website, we have in those 20,000, 40,000 web pages, we have a bunch of old conferences that took place at the library years ago. They're put up in static HTML pages now. They're not easily findable. The proceedings, to the extent that they're in there, are not searched or indexed well. So this will make all that stuff both preserved and indexed and findable. And we wanted to migrate them, which is also good, into Drupal. The other thing that Eli Scholar does is it provides for portfolio pages. They call it Selected Works. This is an optional add-on that we did subscribe to. It turns out there were a fair number of Yale faculty members who already had a Selected Works page. And once we turned it on, it now is a branded Yale Selected Works page. That's really the only change that happened as far as they're concerned. But to look at one, here we have someone on the law faculty. Actually, he's at Stanford Law School, but apparently has a Yale affiliation as well. Okay, was also at Yale. Anyway, here's an entire list of all of his preprints, postprints, articles, and he's got a ton of them. All on this web page. Again, all indexed by Google, easy to find, and he gets monthly reports of download statistics, how many people are downloading these articles. The templates for these are all much the same. You get a place to put your picture, you get a place to be followed, you can put up some links. A lot of people put up their CV. He has a list of courses he's taught. And you can organize your articles by subjects or article types. They've got some other built-in tools for organizing the content. But it takes literally 5 minutes to set one of these pages up. It takes no time. We have the ability to bring this up. It's accessible to staff, faculty, and graduate students at Yale. So anybody in any of those categories who wants to set up one of these pages, it's easy to do. We're in the process of getting training now for the scholarly publishing community in terms of how to roll this out. And we're going to make a more public announcement of it, by the end of August, basically, for fall term. So that's Eli Scholar.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
The last URL for the, so it looks like that's actually out on the BPress site?
Yes, because he had already set up this site without any institutional sponsorship. And once we turned it on, because he has Yale listed as his institutional affiliation, somewhere in his contact page, it gets the Yale branding. And if he changes his institutional affiliation at some point, he still keeps the site, he just loses the Yale branding. It's the only thing that happens. So people can take this with them. It's mobile. It's portable. And again, we haven't done any outreach about this other than turning it on. I did send emails to the people that BPress identified as being Yale affiliates and saying, your branding's going to change, just so you know. Don't be shocked when you log in and it says Yale at the top. Actually, I don't think anybody emailed me back. I don't think anybody minded. So that's Eli Scholar. Switching back again. And on Aries, I already talked about a little bit, so I won't go into this because, again, it is kind of behind-the-scenes library stuff. It is important to note that we added a new position in the library to support these systems, which is important from my perspective because we certainly have a history in the past of bringing up systems all over the place without ever really dedicating anybody to support them. And just assuming that, hey, it's just more work, it gets spread across everybody. And that doesn't work too well. Certainly given the 300+ little systems we have that are floating around out there that we're trying to support at the same time. So it's an important precedent for us, at least, to say if you're going to bring up something enterprise-wide as far as the library is concerned, we need to commit to supporting it properly. We can't just bring it up in islands. SQL 2012, this is just an example of what one of the folks in our library did using it to create a dashboard and access services. I'm showing requests over the past 5 days and how fast they get completed and what the turnaround time is. So these are the kinds of things we see doing more of now that we have some reporting tools that are a little more easy to use and a little more powerful than what we've had in the past. We trained a large number of interested users in this, and we've got the server up and running and it's supported. So, I think we actually just hired, he's not come on board yet, a metrics manager for the library who will be in charge of figuring out what do we really need to track library-wide to gauge our performance. And we'll be working with that person closely to try and develop more of these kinds of tools so that we track the right things and don't just say, hey, we're throwing up a data warehouse of everything, good luck. Because that data warehouse idea is just too big given the amount of data we have. Voyager utilities enhancements. Again, this is kind of behind-the-scenes stuff. We have, 10, 12 million MARC records in Voyager, MARC being the library cataloging format of the moment. That's going to change. We know that Voyager is going to go away in a few years. It's an old line system. It's an old client-server system. It's kind of ugly. It's on the downside of its lifespan. The vendor is developing a next-generation library system, which is currently in beta in a number of places. There are a few other vendors out there with next-generation library systems. We know we need to move to one of them. Probably we'll start looking at them within the next year. But it's going to be a massive project because we have such a huge library collection. So we're going to do a lot of cleanup. We have a lot of old records. We have bad records. We have records that aren't necessarily in Library of Congress classification schemes. They're in something called the old Yale classification scheme. So we're going to crosswalk those in so they get modern cataloging records. And just a lot of cleanup. The more cleanup we do, the easier the migration would be. We have things like the red light, green light project. This is something we put together called the Virtual Review Plaza. A big chunk of the library had to move out of its offices in technical services recently while those offices were being renovated. They used to have a place called the Review Plaza down there where books would come in from publishers for reviews. Do we want to keep them? Which do we keep? Which do we send back? Didn't have any space for that anymore because the whole space was being renovated. So basically we created an online version of that so that they could do the review without having to walk down cases of books. And that's actually being expanded out. But it's a tool for searching for new materials when they're required, who's the selector for them, who's interested in them, and tracking that. So again, because we have a somewhat limited old library system, it doesn't have all of these tools built in, so we still have to build them. Identity management. As many of you know, the university is working on a replacement for the many identity management systems in use around campus. For us, this is important. The library has a particular need for identity management because we buy a lot of e-resources. It's the largest single part of our acquisitions budget currently is e-resources. It's not books. It's not print materials. If you're not on the Yale campus, how do you get to those e-resources? You have to authenticate into them. Currently, we have two systems in place. The medical campus is using something called SQUID, a proxy server. It's an open source system, which is kind of old and which they'd like to get off of and not have to support anymore.
Kind of old.
Kind of old, yes. Yeah, some of us know more about SQUID than we want to. Everybody else uses VPN software, which I was somewhat surprised to find when I got here. It's not a standard way. It's a little bit like using a cannon to kill a gnat. But that's the way you have to get in, and it causes problems. You have to have the VPN software. You have to install it. We've got people running, the Chinese version of Windows, and all kinds of things that turn out not to work too well with the VPN software. So we spend time fiddling with it, and it's a barrier to entry. It just makes it harder. If you're a graduate student and you're in your apartment off campus, you've got to go in through the VPN software to get to all of these resources. So we're going to be moving, hopefully, with the help of ITS and the identity management process, into a single sign-on system that works for everybody and has a low barrier to entry and doesn't require you to have VPN software. And once you've signed in, the system will know, okay, this is a Yale person. And it's a student or it's a faculty member or an alumni, which we currently don't have any way to track easily because sometimes they have different rights. And then they can get into the resources they need. So that's called federated identity management. It's a big issue for us. I'm really happy that ITS is tackling it. It's one reason why I haven't tackled it yet, because I knew this process was kind of coming down the pike in ITS. So I said I'm not going to deal with things like proxy servers until I see what the university is doing as a whole. The Hydra project is our big development effort. Many of the things I've been talking about have been out of the box. bpress for Eli Scholar is out of the box. Aeon and Ares are hosted systems. We have a lot of configuration issues in terms of bringing them up, but we're using them out of the box. Hydra is something we have to do ourselves. Digital collections at Yale. When I got here, I asked, how many digital collections does the library have? I had 50, 60, 70, we don't know exactly. A lot. I said, okay, well, what system are they in? 5 or 6 or 7 different systems. We have digital collections in Content DM. We have digital collections in Greenstone. We have digital collections in Fedora, although an old version of Fedora. We have digital collections in SQL Server. We have 1 or 2 in Access. We have probably some other systems that I don't even know about. All of them were essentially developed as one-offs. Someone had an idea for a collection. They either had departmental funding or they had outside funding from a grant. They brought it up. Great. They have a collection now. Not a sustainable model going forward. It's not easy to search them. They aren't all to the same standards. We can't support some of those old databases anymore. So we have joined a collaborative process called the Hydra Project. We became official members just a couple of weeks ago, as in May. We're one of 18 official partners. Stanford and Columbia are the two groups we've been talking with the most about who are already in Hydra. The Hydra motto, which I'm not going to remember precisely, is something like if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go in a group. We have a long history of going fast, bringing up 60 little digital collections, all differently. We're trying to go far now. We're trying to get some standards in place and develop a sustainable system. There is no out-of-the-box product that does what we need to do for digital collections. If there were, we'd use it. We tried with Content DM a number of years ago. It just does not scale up to the size that we need. So although we're still running a bunch of Content DM collections, we're hoping to migrate them into the Hydra repository as soon as possible. So we're developing within the Hydra community, which means it's a shared code base. We're bringing up about 6 initial collections by the end of August that will be in the Hydra Fedora stack, essentially, and using Blacklight, which is what they call a Hydra head, as the interface. So that will be our proof of concept, essentially, for the Fedora Hydra community. We're also getting code from Columbia, which I'm going to show in a minute, for discovery. We're potentially going to be working with Stanford on a geoportal in Hydra. So there's lots of collaboration projects out there. We also have some collaborative partners interested in tapping our user experience group to do some more usability testing, because all these things are being developed in a large community sort of on the fly and rapidly. So they tend to be coming out in a fairly vanilla flavor. And we all want to customize it to some extent without losing the benefits of collaboration. But we also want to know what works well. I mean, it's not necessarily your first guess at what works well. But I'll show some examples in a minute. So that's the Hydra project. Unfortunately, that's not quite up yet. We do have a beta version that kind of goes on and off depending on what they're doing on the servers. But it will be up by end of August. Yes?
How does this relate to other kinds of digital asset management applications? Is it a replacement, or is it
it replaces, or it will soon replace the 50 or 60 library collections in the half dozen or more systems. So our initial goal is just to come up with something sensible so that we're not trying to support all those systems and they're all searchable. It's using fairly standard technology underneath. I mean, Fedora has been adopted by well over 100 academic libraries at this point. They aren't all necessarily running the approved Hydra version of it. And it's running on a Solar index underneath. So as we build it out, the goal is to have a Blacklight search interface that can search really any Solar index. It doesn't have to hit ours. It could hit others. So we're trying to be as generalizable as possible. But our first priority is just to solve the library's problems, which are kind of massive, just to get through the next year and bring up the collections we're committed to, plus the collections we need to migrate out of aging systems. And the collections we're doing first are not easy ones. That was one of the first things I said when I got here is, boy, if I were picking some collections to build a new digital infrastructure that's going to be the one going forward, I would not have started with collections in Arabic that read right to left. I would not have started with 750 terabytes of video from the Fortunoff archive. And I would not have started with projects that require very granular authentication systems. It's one thing to bring up a bunch of stuff in open access. That's easy. It's fairly easy to bring up a system that's like Yale login access. Although, again, with identity management of it in flux, it'll be easier once that system is in place. But we have systems where it's one-to-one. Someone has to email a librarian and say, may I have access to this object within this collection? And someone has to review that application and approve it and say, yes, you now have access to this digital object. That's a very granular process. So that's going to require some custom work. And actually, we're planning to leverage Aon, which I mentioned as the special collections management tool, and use it to manage not just access to your Shakespeare folio, but maybe to a digital file, where we also need to know exactly who you are and are you someone that should have access to this digital file. So we're going to use that as essentially a front end for authentication in that case. But all of those are difficult and unsolved problems. I mean, a lot of people out there have versions of doing some of these things, but there is no standard Hydra way to do that yet. So we're building it. The good news is if we get through the next 6 months, we'll have done most of the really hard stuff. And then we can just worry about scale, which at a place like Yale is an issue of its own. So that's Hydra. A little bit about discovery. I mentioned those 8 or 10 or however many search boxes we currently have on the library homepage. We have some plans to change that. This summer, we are bringing up a product called Summon. It's by Serial Solutions. Again, it's a hosted solution. We don't have to create a server for it, for our e-resources. Right now, there is no easy way to search across our e-resources, particularly journal articles, which is what students and faculty really need to find and what we spend a vast amount of money providing for them. Summon will provide us an out-of-the-box way to search a very large percentage of our e-resources. We are also bringing up that first half dozen digital collections with a blacklight search interface, so they will have a common search interface across them as well. In the fall, we will have both those live, knocking wood. I'll show you Summon in a minute so you can see what it looks like in beta. During the fall, we'll work on integrating Summon with blacklight. So we will then have 2 things consolidated into one, the e-resources and our new digital collections, the ones that are in the new infrastructure. And we'll be adding more digital collections all along the way into the fall and probably throughout 2014 and on into the, well, hopefully not too far in the future before we migrate that 50 or 60 old ones into there. So that gets us a lot of content in one place. But in 2014, we also, within that search interface, are going to bring in the LibGuides, which all the librarians are creating for subject guides, the website itself, and all the other information that's in Drupal or other pages, the library catalog, and the law library catalog. What a concept, getting them both in one place. You don't have to search them in 2 different places anymore, and you can search them in e-resources at the same time. Most of the legacy digital collections will have gone in, and the Borrow Direct partnership, which is the sort of giant union catalog of Ivies Plus, is talking about having a blacklight interface available in 2014 as well, which means you won't have to search the catalog, say, darn, I can't find it. Now I have to go over to the Borrow Direct, redo the search, see if I can find it there. If they don't have it, darn, now I have to request an interlibrary loan from someone outside the Borrow Direct. It's a multi-step process now. We're trying to bring all that into one place. So Summon is going to be the discovery layer for e-journals. Here is what it looks like. Again, beta, but the link works. Yale.summon.serialsolutions.com. And I will once again switch over and actually show it live, hopefully. There it is. It's a single search box, nice and vanilla. We'll make a widget out of it and put it on the home page, so you don't necessarily have to see this page, because nobody really wants to see that page. But if I search for something on it, yeah, Shakespeare, something very general like an undergraduate might start with, you will get 812,000 results. Because we've already started setting up our e-resources in here. They aren't all in yet. They have a knowledge base that underlies all this, where you give them all the vendors that you've subscribed to and you turn them on. And they have deals with most of the vendors, not all of them, because not all vendors want to talk to each other, but a very large proportion of our big ones. And a lot of the content is indexed in full text. Some of it is not. Some of it's only indexed at the abstract level, and that's very much a moving target because the deals are changing all the time. But that's okay. I think our students now understand that the web is not a static thing. It's changing all the time. You're not going to get the same thing searching this month that you got last month, and that's going to be the case here too, because the vendors are changing.
Hi, Michael. We had a question come in from Patrick over Twitter. He asks, would you ask about APIs making data freely and directly accessible? Is that what we're seeing here, or is that just one element of it?
It's one element of it. Yeah, I mean, the Summon. Well, I mean, Summon is, I wouldn't say it's freely accessible. We have to buy Summon. But it does make our data certainly more available, and it does have some APIs which work with blacklight, which I'm going to show in a minute. In terms of making our digital collections data available, we have no objection to anyone getting to anything that's open access. I mean, it's going to be findable from our site. It's also going to be findable from Google or Google Scholar. If anybody wanted to build a more custom API into it, I guess we'd talk to them. We would have no particular objection. So here's just an example of a random search. It's obviously way too big, but it gives you like a recommended resource. Hey, you have World Shakespeare Bibliography online. It only does that for very general searches. Whereas think, oh, this is clearly someone who doesn't know how to narrow things down yet. But you get this nice modern interface on the left. If I want to, I can exclude newspaper articles, which we're actually going to turn on by default because there's just too many newspaper articles. That reduces it by half. Now you're down to 333,000 results. If I want to just limit to scholarly publications, including peer review, I can do that. Now I'm down to 98,000 results. Peer-reviewed only, that'll limit it even more. No, a little bit, 84,000 results. But you can browse by journal type, you can browse by subject term, you can do publication date, there's a little slider for that, language, there's other facets. So it's a modern, faceted browsing interface. People are used to that idea. And you get, places where journal articles are. This one has full text online. I don't know if the linking is set up yet, but we'll try. But if it is set up, then it would take you directly to the article. In this case, it takes you to a link to the article. So it's in like 4 different databases. We have links to this article. So you have multiple ways to get to many of these things. So all that is now in one nice little interface, which we will create a widget for, and that will replace some of those old search boxes that we have on the website. Blacklight is under development now. We've got 4 Arcadia projects plus the Yale Indian Papers project that are coming up in August. We're adding the migration from the Content DM collections in 2014 because we'd really like to shut Content DM down because we're paying for it every year. We got a bunch of older Fedora collections, which will be relatively easy to migrate because they're already in Fedora, just an older version. We've got the Fortunoff collection, which is the 750 terabytes or so of video, Holocaust testimonies. We have Kissinger Archive coming in, which is a vast amount of material. We have some new Arcadia projects coming up, and we have lots of old things to migrate. So we have lots of digital collections that we need to have interfaces to. And now I'm going to show you an example of what this can look like, because someone else has already done it. And this is the case where collaboration is starting to pay off. Columbia is a Hydra partner. I've met with my counterpart there, and they're more than happy to share their code with us. They've been working on exactly what we want to do, it turns out. They have some Fedora collections. In their case, it's their institutional repository. It's mostly scholarly articles. So it's a little simpler than ours. They're not trying to put up these 10 different types of content in multiple languages like we are, but it's a Fedora-based collection. They also have Summon for e-resources. And they, like us, thought, hey, wouldn't it be nice to bring all that into one place? They also are running the same integrated library system we are, which is Voyager from Ex Libris. And they wanted to bring all that in one place as well. And they did. And they said, hey, you can have our code. And I said, really? Great. I like this partnership thing. So that's what we're going to do in the fall, is we're going to start implementing essentially the Columbia code. Now, when I first started looking at it a few months ago, it was a little link on their front page that said, beta, Clio beta. And you had to click on it to get to it. About 3 weeks ago, I checked it out again, and much to my happy surprise, it is now the main link. It's no longer beta. If you go to the Columbia Library website, you see that one single top search box, and that's it. That takes you into their Blacklight interface of everything. Well, maybe not everything, but as much as they've been able to get in yet, which coincidentally and happily is pretty much the same stuff we want to get in there. So rather than show you pictures of it, I will just show you the Columbia site, which is right there. And you can see it's searching by default the catalog, same catalog we have, Voyager. Articles, coming from Summon, same way ours are going to be. Academic Commons, which is their Fedora repository, and the website. Kind of cuts it off there. But if I search for something in this one, and something they'll have in their archives, let's search, New York architecture. This is what they have created. This is all in Blacklight. On the left side, under Catalog, it's pulling things from their Voyager catalog. On the right side, under Articles, it's pulling a couple of top articles from Summon, from their e-resources. I scroll down a little further. Here's a section from their Academic Commons. So these are their internal institutional repository articles that show up on the same hits. A little further down, I think they've also got the library website. So they've picked 4 things as the default search that will show up on the home page of any search you do. This is called the bento box approach out there in the Fedora community. And this is one of the things that we're interested in working with them on. Is this the right ratio of content from each place? Is this what users appreciate? So we're going to do some usability testing on that with our users. But other than that, it's fairly vanilla. But if you say, well, and you can change what you're searching over here. Maybe I'm really only interested in the academic commons. You can do it from that side. Or I'm only interested in ebooks or something like that. But if you say you really just care about the catalog, again, you can click on all results, and then it takes you just into a catalog interface. But now you have lots of faceting options. You can, I want books, I want images, I want conference proceedings, I can go by publication date or acquisition date or location, a whole variety of subject headings and other classification schemes. So this is what we hope to be bringing up in the fall, essentially a Yale-branded version of this, and then to continue working with Columbia on refinements to the interface, essentially. What can we do to make it better and more responsive to what our users are asking for. So that's Columbia, and that's just a picture of it, which I already showed you. So what are some common threads of all these projects I'm talking about? Well, one of them is just reducing complexity. We have way too many systems, way too many components of systems. We have too many web pages, although we're reducing them. We're starting to have more virtual servers and fewer physical servers. We still have a few too many physical servers, and some of them are running old, unpatched versions of operating systems because they have a custom digital collection that was put on them that hasn't been updated. We're doing more out-of-the-box solutions and fewer custom solutions. We know we're going to be putting a lot of resources into the Hydra blacklight development, but we don't want to be putting other resources into other things where solutions are already out there. So we're building only when we can't buy. We're trying to converge on broad solutions instead of having multiple solutions. A couple of primary digital collection platforms instead of 6 or 8. Fewer versions of special collections management rather than many. Even LibCal, the room scheduling system, which I didn't show, but it's on the main web page. If you click on reserved study rooms, I think it's in the header. When I got here, we had one at the center, and another library was about to buy another copy of the same software. I said, well, we don't need 2 copies of the same software. We can get one, and we can get a larger license, and we can all get along. So we did that. And now we have rooms available for scheduling in 3 or 4 or 5 branches, and a couple more they're still working on configuring it. And we're using central Yale resources where appropriate, moving to Yale sites for the Drupal portion of our website, hooking into the identity management project. I'm sure there will be more down the road, but those are the first 2. We're also moving things to the cloud, and this is already obviously happening Yale-wide with Box.net. We're using Basecamp. Looks like Office 365 is likely. So we know this is happening out there, but we're doing it too. The SpringShare products, LibCal, LibGuides, LibAnalytics, they're all hosted solutions. Eli Scholar, hosted solution. Summon, and more importantly, the knowledge base it uses, which feeds not only Summon, but some other things, including potentially link management. That's all cloud-based. Aeon and Aries hosted. Probably their next generation LLS is going to be a hosted solution. Most of them are. Storage, currently we're running all our own storage. That's likely to change. We are members of the Digital Preservation Network. We're waiting for pricing from them in terms of keeping preservation copies of these hundreds of terabytes of digital collections that we have to manage. So we're going to be doing more of that, which also relates to collaboration, both internal, where we're trying to syndicate content by using things like LibGuides, where each librarian can manage their own content, maintain it, update it. It's just within a common format and standards. Eli Scholar, we put up a platform. If you want to manage content, if you want to create your own portfolio page, we'll help you set it up, but it's up to you, so what you want to do with it. Same with journals. We'll work with the vendor to get the journal set up, then the editorial staff runs the journal. We don't ever have to touch it again, and we don't want to. We don't have enough people to touch it, even if we did want to. But we're trying not to be a bottleneck. We're trying to just facilitate. SQL 2012 as well, we're offering kind of minimal support within department, but we did training for, I think, almost a couple of dozen librarians on it a couple of months ago. So we will provide training and resources as much as we can so that we aren't the bottleneck for content creation. And we're collaborating with a lot of external partners. The Bar Direct Partnership for materials, the Digital Preservation Network for preserving all of this digital content, the DuraSpace and Fedora Futures Group, which is related to the Hydra partnership but a little different. It's the Fedora side of things. So we are not going it alone anymore as we have in the past. And we're not going in 5 different directions either. We're going in one direction and with a bunch of other people. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're trying to do. It's a little bit of cleanup of old systems. It's a little bit of bringing in new systems, and it's also trying to come up with a slightly different philosophy moving ahead. than I think we've had in the past, where we've been pretty island-based, pretty scattered in our development efforts, and we're trying to be more strategic and more aligned with partners both within Yale and outside Yale. Questions? Yes.
You mentioned you had 80,000 web pages, and you're trying to get them down to 10,000. What would these pages represent? It's a phenomenal number.
It is a phenomenal number. There were, I mean, you name it, it was in there. I mean, an exhibition that someone did in the library 12 years ago, and they put up 10 web pages describing it, and they had just accumulated. You know, policies and procedures, some of them were, but really old ones and out-of-date ones. I mean, a lot of them our webmaster was just able to look at and said, well, this clearly doesn't apply anymore, and just delete. Others have required actually trying to talk to people and figure out, well, which of this is still relevant, which is why we were slowing down a little bit.
A lot of change going on, and I think you made a point of how user experience was an important part of that change. Can you talk about change management, especially given a user population that, you know, some members of which might be resistant to change?
I think the library is aware that it has to change. It helps that we have a new university librarian who's only been there about a year longer than I have, and had kind of prepared the ground for needed change. Part of which is the idea that we are one library. We're not a collection of 15 or 20 libraries, depending on what you count as a location. So we're trying to get everybody on the same page just internally, and I think there's general agreement about the need to do that, because it's become clear that the old way of doing things just isn't sustainable. So in some ways, change management is pointing that out. We can't keep doing things that way. In terms of how we are going to do it next, you build credibility. I mean, we brought up some small projects that have worked. I think the website redesign, well, still is going to be dragging on for another year before we get all of those 20,000 or 40,000 remaining pages figured out, has already been pretty successful in moving forward. Bringing up the room scheduling and getting everybody on board to use a common platform to do the room scheduling, let the students do self-service room scheduling, that helps as well. The next 3-4 months are when the big systems come up, as far as I'm concerned. Our credibility gets built when we bring up those first 6 Hydra collections, when we bring up Summon as an e-resources search platform, and then a few months after that when we integrate them. And also when we launch Eli Scholar officially, which will also be this fall. So those are 3 major projects that right now are literally about 2 months off from public launch. At that point, I think change kind of has momentum behind it. So I think it's mostly delivering results at this point. I think people are on board with the general concept that we can't do things the old way, and that we have to be more efficient in our use of resources and work together more. Now we just have to deliver. Yeah.
You highlighted earlier in the presentation the integration of the electronic reserves of Platinum V2. We had another question come in over Twitter asking, what additional opportunities for collaboration do you see with ITS?
Well, one is drawing on the same concept of doing e-reserves. As we update all those libguides, we have subject librarians creating subject libguides. There's economics libguides, there's bioinformatics libguides, there's astronomy, every academic category you can think of. My hope would be as soon as we get them all updated into the new format so they look consistent and nice, which we're working on now and we'll be working on over the summer, to work again with the classes V2 group. So can we automatically integrate, so if you're in Econ 101, you get the Econ LibGuide showing up automatically within classes. It's not that hard to do. I did it at my old job, but it does require some coordination with whoever is running Sakai. We could also take that down to the granular level, because in some cases librarians will create a LibGuide for an individual class. So all you have to really do is match up the course number with the LibGuide, and you can automatically populate that. So that would be one of the next things I'd look for. Any more? All right. Well, thank you all very much.